Hamlet is one of the most dangerous things ever set down on paper. All the big, unknowable questions like what it is to be a human being, the difference between sanity and insanity, the meaning of life and death, what's real and not real, all these subjects can literally drive you mad. Nothing is a matter of life and death except life and death. When there's an emergency weather situation, the local broadcaster is the source of information that often makes the difference between life and death. If you think of life and death on a continuum, finding the point where it tips is complicated. It cuts across all political lines and gets to the root of our humanity. It requires faith informed by years of intimacy that you're doing what's right for your loved one. To have faith doesn't mean you get any less frustrated when you don't do your best, but you know that it's not life and death. Take what you're given, and when you continue to work hard, you will see results. That will give you the confidence you need to keep going. In my solitude I have pondered much on the incomprehensible subjects of space, eternity, life and death. There are a ton of medical dramas out there dealing with life and death. I think what's always been interesting to me than the science and the criminality with this job is what happens to your persona, your disposition, after day in and day out dealing with life and death. Life and death matters, yes, and the question of how to behave in this world, how to go in the face of everything. Time is short and the water is rising. Art is built on the deepest themes of human meaning, good and evil, beauty and ugliness, life and death, love and hate. No other story has incarnated those themes more than the story of Jesus. You're taught from the day you start medical school that you're a god, that you can have power over life and death. So when your life starts to crumble, and the highest power you see is looking back in the mirror, and you know that power is flawed, it is very hard to get past that. The Prime Minister found something hopeful in the man's eyes and manner. The 30 or so people who run this world analyze one another that way and then make decisions of life and death for us. Scary, but true. As far as songwriting, my inspirations came from love, life and death, and viewing other people's situations. When a president makes life and death decisions, he should draw strength and wisdom from broad and deep experience with the reasons for and the risks of committing our children to our defense. For no matter how many others are involved in the decision, the president is a lonely man in a dark room when the casualty reports come in. If we go into space, we need enhancements that handle radiation and osteoporosis, or else we're dead. So what seems like an enhancement in one generation becomes life and death in another generation. When you're in the military, you teeter on the edge of that line of life and death. The reason you feel so alive when you come through is because you know you've cheated death, and the adrenaline rush is addictive, no question. People meet in bars after work all over the world and talk about the great problems of life and death and the world and politics, and they don't take themselves seriously. They can do nothing else except chat about these things in bars after work. The essence of the Hebrew Bible, transmitted by Christianity, is separation, between life and death, nature and God, good and evil, man and woman, and the holy and the profane. In an artwork you're always looking for artistic decisions, so an ashtray is perfect. An ashtray has got life and death. Life and death. They are somehow sweetly and beautifully mixed, but I don't know how. If a man can bridge the gap between life and death, if he can live on after he's dead, then maybe he was a great man. If you make every game a life and death proposition, you're going to have problems. For one thing, you'll be dead a lot. Football, soccer, is a matter of life and death, except more important. Hatred is corrosive of a person's wisdom and conscience. The mentality of enmity can poison a nation's spirit, instigate brutal life and death struggles, destroy a society's tolerance and humanity, and block a nation's progress to freedom and democracy. The very essence of literature is the war between emotion and intellect, between life and death. When literature becomes too intellectual, when it begins to ignore the passions, the emotions, it becomes sterile, silly, and actually without substance. I think to have the skill set and the ability to physically help others in matters of life and death must be incredibly empowering. When you look at death, it makes you understand the importance of the moment when you have life and death in front of you. And you witness seeing someone deteriorating in front of you. It's an overwhelming experience. If you don't learn from that, I don't know what else you're gonna learn. The art of war is of vital importance to the state. It is a matter of life and death, a road either to safety or to ruin. Hence it is a subject of inquiry which can on no account be neglected. Everything tends to make us believe that there exists a certain point of the mind at which life and death, the real and the imagined, past and future, the communicable and the incommunicable, high and low, cease to be perceived as contradictions. There are only three events in a man's life: birth, life, and death. He is not conscious of being born, he dies in pain, and he forgets to live. Life and death have been lacking in my life. The consequences of decisions don't just affect spreadsheets. They affect, in fundamental ways, the lives of people, and they often mean the difference between life and death. It was from an old friend who thought he was dying. Anyway, he said, life and death issues don't come along that often, thank God, so don't treat everything like it's life or death. Go easier. If your best friend has stolen your girlfriend, it does become life and death. In this life and death case, I felt Mrs. Schiavo should receive the fullest due process from our legal system. In cold weather states like Vermont, where the weather can get to 20 below zero, home heating assistance is critically important. In fact, it is a life and death issue. Life and death are illusions. We are in a constant state of transformation. Life and death appeared to me ideal bounds, which I should first break through, and pour a torrent of light into our dark world. Now I am training with sparring partners who are nice people, sure, but not my friends. These are sparring partners who want to knock me out in sparring. In the Croatian media, they said it was life and death sparring. It was not quite life and death, but it was all-out fighting, very hard. I am politically pro-choice, but personally pro-life. I have my faith but refuse to force it on the world at large, especially this world, so brutal and unjust. I cannot make these wrenching personal life and death decisions for others, nor do I believe they should be made by a church run by childless men. Human experience resembles the battered moon that tracks us in cycles of light and darkness, of life and death, now seeking out and now stealing away from the sun that gives it light and symbolizes eternity. Stories hold conflict and contrast, highs and lows, life and death, and the human struggle and all kinds of things. Serenity is the balance between good and bad, life and death, horrors and pleasures. Life is, as it were, defined by death. If there wasn't death of things, then there wouldn't be any life to celebrate. But the issue is not only life and death but our existence before God and our being judged by Him. All of us were sinners before Him and worthy of condemnation. Life and death are important. Don't suffer them in vain. Most drugs sold in the U.S. are produced outside of the country, and if we can ensure supply chain safety for these drugs, introducing more of them to the market quicker could mean major differences in the price of drugs, quality of life for patients, and for some Americans the difference between life and death. Medicine really matured me as a person because, as a physician, you're obviously dealing with life and death issues much more serious than what we're talking about in entertainment. You can't get more serious than life and death, and if you can handle that, you can handle anything. Once it gets to a point where it becomes a matter of life and death to occupy a position of leadership or not, with an eye on future opportunities, therein lies the danger. Life and death. At some point we're gonna leave this world. Do I know when? Absolutely not. Sometimes, how you ingest this idea of masculinity as projected onto you by the world could be the difference of life and death. Visit our website for more quotes, quoting.com.